Have you ever been happy about intentionally manipulating someone? Every Thursday for 3 years, I told my wife Becca the same thing. I'm going to hang with the boys tonight. Be back around midnight. Truth is, I was driving to the cinema to watch movies alone because I just needed some me time. But then 2 months ago, my movie ended abruptly, and I came home 2 hours earlier than planned. When I turned onto our street, there was a black Infiniti in our driveway. My heart stopped as I watched back all the footage from our doorbell camera and saw a man getting out of the car and walking up like he'd done it before. Becca opened before he could ring. They kissed, the kind where her hand went to his neck. My stomach dropped. I wanted to burst through that door and confront them, but I decided on the spot that would be too kind. I needed to do something else, something that would destroy her. So I drove around until 12:30 and walked in with a story about Tony getting drunk. Becca was showering. Hey babe, how was your night? Good. You know how it is. The next 2 Thursdays, I kept my routine but parked down the street at 8:30 to watch. At the same time, the same car pulled up. I zoomed in on the ring footage, and that's when it hit me. The man was Mark. Mark, who supposedly moved to Seattle 2 years ago. My knees were shaking, but I took screenshots and sent them to my lawyer to further build my case. When I was confident enough that I had everything basically set up, I dropped the bomb. Becca was going on about her fake plans for when I left for boys' night, when I randomly blurted out, "You know who I miss? Mark. That guy and I used to have so much fun before he moved to Seattle." Her fork stopped halfway to her mouth, just for a second. "Yeah, Mark was great. You guys still text though, right? Sometimes." The next morning she woke up different with this nervous energy. She made some phone calls behind closed doors, and since it was Thursday during lunch, she texted, "What time are you heading out tonight?" She never asked before, so I knew the comment about Mark got her. Probably 7:30, why? Just wondering. The guy's doing anything special? Same old. After work, she was cooking in full makeup. "You look nice," I said. "Just felt like making an effort for you to come home to." But she kept checking her phone and setting it down, then picking it back up. At 7:15, she practically pushed me out. "Don't want you to be late. Tell everyone I say hi." I drove to my regular spot down the street where I watched them, but this time there was no car that showed up. And at 9:15, Becca's own car pulled out. I followed her. First stop, O'Malley's Sports Bar, where she thought I'd be. She walked in confidently, then came out 5 minutes later looking confused, checking her phone, scanning the parking lot. Then she got back in her car. Her second stop, the Dugout, another sports bar. Through the windows, I watched her walk the entire place, moving table to table, even checking the bathroom entrance area. She showed her phone to a waitress who shrugged. Back to the car, more frantic phone checking. Third stop, Buffalo Wild Wings. She stayed longer this time, 15 minutes. I could see her at the bar talking to the manager, showing him something on her phone, probably my picture. He shook his head, pointed to their mostly empty tables. Thursday wasn't exactly prime sports bar night. Fourth stop, the dive bar where Tony actually used to drag us. She went straight to the bartender. I slipped in through the side door, ducked into the hallway by the bathrooms, heard her say, "Every Thursday night." Group of guys, probably 5 or 6 of them, loud. One of them looks like this. The bartender studied her phone. "Thursday's our slowest night. I definitely remember a regular group. Sorry." She left, looking frustrated, sat in her car for 5 minutes typing furiously. Then she drove to the AMC theater. I gave her a 10-minute head start, then walked in through the side entrance. She was at the concession stand, talking to the teenage manager. Showed her phone again. He pointed toward the theaters. She went to check each one, opening doors, scanning the sparse Thursday night crowds. I went back to my car. 20 minutes later, she emerged, looking defeated. Sat in her car for another 10 minutes. Through her rear window, I could see her on the phone, gesturing with her free hand. Probably calling Mark, probably saying she couldn't find me anywhere, that maybe I knew, that Thursday nights might not be safe anymore. She even drove by 2 more bars on the way home. Quick stops, desperate checks. When I got home at my usual time, she was on the couch with wine, trying to look casual, but her leg was bouncing. "How was your night?" Studying my face. "Good. Same as always." "Yeah? Where exactly did you guys go?" "O'Malley's." "Why?" Her jaw clenched. "No reason. Just curious." "Was it busy?" "Pretty dead, actually." "Who all was there?" "Haven't heard their names in a while." "The usual crew." Each answer made her fidget more. She stood abruptly. "I'm tired. It's been 2 hours." I could hear her upstairs on the phone, voice low but urgent. Probably with Mark. Probably trying to figure out if I know, if Thursday nights are blown, if mentioning his name was a message. The next day, I was ready to confront her. Saturday morning came, and I heard the shower turn on upstairs at exactly 9:15, like it always did on weekends. I grabbed my laptop from the office and set it up on the kitchen table, right where she'd have to walk past to get her coffee. The ring footage was already loaded, paused on that perfect frame of her and Mark kissing at our front door. My hands were steady as I adjusted the screen angle to make sure she couldn't miss it. The coffee maker gurgled and filled the kitchen with that dark roast smell she loved. I poured myself a cup and sat down facing the stairs, waiting. The shower stopped after 12 minutes. I heard her moving around upstairs, the closet door opening, drawers sliding shut. My heart was pounding, but I kept my breathing normal. Finally, her footsteps came down the hall and started down the stairs. She was humming something, probably feeling relieved that I hadn't said anything about Thursday night. Her bare feet hit the kitchen tile, and she walked straight toward the coffee maker in her white robe, hair still damp. Then she saw the laptop screen. She froze completely, one hand reaching for a mug that never made it off the shelf. Her face went from relaxed to white in about 2 seconds. She stood there staring at the screen, at herself, kissing Mark, and I watched her realize that I'd known for 2 whole months. That Thursday night wasn't about me finding out, but about me watching her panic and search for me all over town. Her mouth opened, but no words came out. I took a sip of coffee and told her my lawyer already had copies of everything. 8 different Thursday nights, all documented, all showing the same thing. She started to say something, but I held up my hand. "When you're ready to be honest about everything." Her legs seemed to give out, and she sank into the chair across from me, hands shaking so bad that when she finally poured coffee, it splashed over the rim and made a puddle on the table. She grabbed a paper towel and wiped it up, probably just to have something to do with her hands. Then she looked at me and said it started 6 months ago when Mark reached out. He was having marriage problems and needed someone to talk to. She swore it only became physical 2 months ago. I pulled out my phone and opened Mark's Facebook, scrolling through months of photos. No wife in any of them for over a year. His relationship status had been single since last January. I turned the phone toward her and watched her story about comforting him through marriage problems fall apart. She knew I knew she was still lying. Her hands went to her face, and she started crying. Real ugly crying with her shoulders shaking. She said she was lonely because I was always gone on Thursdays and weekends with the guys. The words hung there between us. The irony was so thick I could taste it. All those Thursday nights I'd been sitting alone in dark movie theaters eating popcorn and watching whatever was playing, just needing some space from everything, while she was in our bed with Mark. But I kept that truth to myself for now. I told her to call Mark right now on speaker and tell him it's over. She shook her head and said that was cruel. Cruel? I leaned forward. You brought him into our house, into our bed. She picked up her phone with shaking fingers and found his number. Her thumb hovered over it for a few seconds before she pressed call. It rang 3 times before Mark answered with a cheerful, "Hey, beautiful." She took a deep breath and told him I knew everything. The silence stretched for what felt like forever, but was probably 10 seconds. Then his voice came through different, careful. "How much does he know?" I leaned toward the phone. "Everything, Mark, including your fake Seattle move." The line went dead immediately. Becca set the phone down and looked completely defeated, like someone had pulled all the bones out of her body. I told her we had 2 choices. We could do this divorce civilly with mediation, or we could go to court where all the evidence would become public record. Her friends would see it. Her parents would see it. Everyone at her work would know exactly what happened. She nodded slowly and said, mediation was fine. Then she asked if we could try counseling first. I actually laughed. Not a mean laugh, but a real one because it was so absurd. She wanted to save a marriage she'd been destroying every single Thursday for months. She wanted to fix something she'd been breaking on purpose, while I sat alone in movie theaters thinking I was the one with the problem for needing space. I told her we could do 1 session for the paperwork, to show we tried, but that was it. She nodded again and went upstairs. I heard drawers opening and closing, hangers scraping across the closet rod. She came back down 20 minutes later with a suitcase, said she'd stay with her sister for a while. I didn't fight it. The house felt different with her gone, like the walls could finally breathe again. I spent the rest of Saturday walking through rooms and seeing them differently. The couch where they probably sat together. The kitchen where they cooked meals. The bed I'd been sleeping in not knowing. Sunday I met with my lawyer again to file the paperwork. She pulled out a thick folder and spread the screenshots across her desk, pointing to timestamps and dates that showed a clear pattern. The evidence timeline proved everything was deliberate and planned, which would help with asset division in our state since adultery affects settlements. She suggested we hire a private investigator to dig deeper, because there might be more we didn't know about. I agreed immediately, wanting the full truth, even if it hurt worse than what I already knew. She made a call right there and set up a meeting with a PI for Monday afternoon. On the way home, I stopped at a coffee shop and finally called Tony. My hands were shaking as I dialed because I knew what I had to tell him. When he answered cheerfully asking about Thursday plans, I just said it straight out that I'd been using his name as an alibi for 3 years. The silence stretched so long I thought he'd hung up. Then he asked why I didn't just tell him I needed alone time instead of lying to everyone. I explained about needing space from Becca, but not wanting to hurt her feelings, though hearing myself say it out loud made it sound stupid. He said he needed time to process that our friendship was built partly on me using him as cover. I understood his anger, and told him my lie was about needing space while Becca's was about betrayal, though I knew that didn't make it right. He hung up, without saying goodbye. That afternoon, Becca came back from her sister's place, and went straight upstairs without speaking. She moved her things into the guest room while I sat in the living room listening to drawers slam and hangers scrape. Later that night, I could hear her on the phone through the wall, her voice muffled but clearly crying as she told her version of events. Monday morning, the PI showed up at my lawyer's office, a former cop who looked like he'd seen everything twice. He took notes as I explained the situation and said he'd start surveillance immediately. By that evening, he already had preliminary information that made my stomach turn. Becca's parents called my cell while I was eating leftover pizza alone in the kitchen. Her mom said Becca told them about the separation, but wouldn't explain why. I simply told them to ask their daughter for the truth, because I wasn't going to be painted as the bad guy in her story. Her dad started to argue, but I hung up. Tuesday passed in a blur of work meetings, where I couldn't focus on anything. Wednesday morning, the PI called with his first real findings. Mark never moved to Seattle at all. He'd been living 20 minutes away in an apartment complex the whole time. His lease started exactly 2 years ago when he supposedly moved for that fake job. The investigator pulled rental records that showed Mark signed the lease the same week he told everyone he was leaving town, but that wasn't even the worst part. The PI also found that Mark and Becca had a joint credit card opened 8 months ago. My legs went weak, and I had to sit down on my office floor as he read me the charges. Dinners at restaurants I'd wanted to try with Becca, concert tickets for bands I'd mentioned, hotel charges for weekend trips when I was visiting my parents. They weren't just meeting on Thursdays. They were basically dating using money from an account I didn't even know existed. The PI emailed me copies of everything, and I printed them at work, my hands shaking as page after page showed their secret life together. That evening, I went home with the stack of papers and found Becca in the kitchen making tea. I dropped the credit card statements on the counter in front of her. She looked at them for maybe 3 seconds before her shoulders dropped. She admitted they'd been together for almost a year, not just the few months I'd thought. Every Thursday wasn't just physical meetings in our house. They were going out to restaurants, seeing movies, attending shows, living the life she claimed she wanted with me while I sat alone in dark theaters. She showed me her phone with their text conversations going back 11 months. Pictures of them at places around town. Selfies from dates. Even a photo from that Vegas trip 6 months ago when she said she was at a work conference. The conference was real, but she never went to a single session. Instead, she spent 3 days with Mark at the Bellagio, using their secret credit card. She tried to explain that it started as emotional support when she felt lonely. Mark would text her during my Thursday nights out, and they'd talk about feeling disconnected from their partners. His marriage had been over for 2 years, but he stayed for his kids until his wife finally filed. That's when he got the apartment, but kept the Seattle story going so people wouldn't ask questions. Becca said their first kiss was an accident 4 months after they started talking, but the credit card records showed they'd already been booking hotels by then. Every lie she told had another lie underneath it, like those Russian dolls that keep getting smaller. The receipts showed they'd even gone to my favorite steakhouse on my birthday, while I was at a work dinner. They sat at the table I'd reserved for Becca and me the following week, which she canceled saying she felt sick. Looking at those papers spread across our kitchen counter, I realized I hadn't known my wife at all for the past year. She spread out more papers on the counter and pointed to a charge from that Italian place I'd been wanting to try for our anniversary. Another one from the concert venue where my favorite band played last month. Page after page showed them doing everything I'd suggested we do together. My hands gripped the edge of the counter until my knuckles went white. She kept talking, but I couldn't focus on the words anymore. I picked up one receipt from a steakhouse dated 3 weeks ago when she said she had to work late. The timestamp showed 8:47 p.m., and the bill was for 2 people. I set it down and looked at her. "I need to tell you something." She stopped mid-sentence and waited. I took a breath and said I hadn't been with the guys on Thursday nights. Her face went blank. I explained how for 3 years I'd been going to the movies alone because I needed space from her constant need for attention. The way she always wanted to do something together every single night. How she'd get upset if I wanted to read or watch TV by myself. Her mouth opened, but nothing came out. Then her face went from guilty to angry to confused all within seconds. She sat down hard in the kitchen chair and stared at the floor. I sat across from her. Neither of us spoke for what felt like forever. 20 minutes passed with just the sound of the dishwasher running. We both sat there processing that we'd been lying to each other for years. Sure, my lie was about needing alone time while hers was about another man. But we both picked lying over just talking about what we needed. She finally looked up and said we should try counseling. I agreed, but only because my lawyer said it would look good for the divorce. She made the appointment for Thursday, which felt like the universe laughing at us. Thursday came, and we drove separate cars to the therapist's office. We sat on opposite ends of a brown leather couch, while Dr. Hanley asked why we were there. Becca jumped in first with her version about how I was always distant and never wanted to spend time with her, how I chose my friends over her every week, how she felt lonely in her own marriage. Dr. Hanley nodded and took notes while Becca painted herself as the victim. When it was my turn, I pulled out my phone and found one of the Ring videos. I turned the screen toward the therapist. This is why we're really here. The video showed Mark walking up to our door, and Becca greeting him with a kiss. Dr. Hanley watched without any change in her expression. She handed the phone back and adjusted her glasses. She suggested that individual therapy might be more helpful at this point. Trust after this level of lying would take years to rebuild if it was even possible. The session ended early, and we walked out to our cars without talking. I drove straight to the bank and walked up to the counter to open my own account. The teller recognized me from years of joint deposits and asked how Becca was doing. I just said we were making some financial changes. She nodded like she understood and helped me set everything up. Friday morning, the PI called and said he had the full report ready. I met him at a coffee shop where he handed me a folder that was thicker than I expected. Mark had been to our house 43 times in the past year, according to the surveillance. Sometimes he stayed overnight when I was traveling for work conferences. The PI had photos of Mark's car in our driveway at 2 a.m. on nights I was gone. There were receipts from hotels near my parents' house when I'd visit them, and Becca would say she couldn't come because of work. The worst part was finding charges for a Vegas trip 6 months ago. Becca had told me she was going to a work conference that weekend. The conference was real, and she was registered, but she never went to any sessions. Instead, there were charges at the Bellagio under their joint credit card. Photos from the hotel security footage showed them checking in together. 3 days in Vegas while I thought she was at boring work meetings. My hands shook as I looked through page after page of evidence. The PI had been thorough with timestamps and locations for everything. I thanked him and paid the final invoice. Back in my car, I sat there for a while just staring at the folder. Then I pulled out my phone and texted Mark that we needed to talk man to man. He read it right away, according to the read receipt. 10 minutes passed before he replied saying, "Okay." We agreed to meet at a coffee shop the next day. He probably thought he could minimize the damage, or maybe even talk me out of the divorce. I drove home and found Becca packing boxes in the bedroom. She said her sister was letting her stay there for a while. I helped her carry boxes to her car without saying much. That night alone in the house felt strange after 12 years of marriage. I walked through each room, seeing them differently now. The bed where Mark had slept, the shower they'd used together, the kitchen where they'd cooked meals while I was supposedly out with friends. Everything felt dirty somehow. I called a cleaning service and scheduled them for the next morning. Then I started looking at apartment listings online. Even if I got the house in the divorce, I didn't want to live with all these memories. The cleaning crew arrived early, and I left them to their work while I went to meet Mark. The coffee shop was mostly empty when I got there. Just a couple people on laptops and Mark already sitting in the corner booth looking like he hadn't slept. He stood up when he saw me, and started with this whole speech about how sorry he was, and how things got out of hand. I cut him off and sat down across from him. I asked him straight up if he ever felt bad knowing I thought he was in Seattle this whole time. His face went red, and he looked down at his coffee cup for a long time before answering. He said they told themselves I wouldn't care since I was always out with the boys anyway, that I probably wanted space from Becca too. The way they built this whole story to make themselves feel better about what they were doing made me sick to my stomach. I had my phone recording in my shirt pocket, and made sure to lean forward, so it would pick up everything. He kept going about how it started innocent, just two old friends catching up, but then feelings developed and before they knew it, things went too far. I asked him point blank if he loved her. He stopped mid-sentence and stared at me for maybe 10 seconds before saying yes, but it came out more like a question than an answer. Then I asked if he was ready to support her financially, because she was about to lose half of everything in the divorce. His whole face changed like someone had dumped cold water on him. He started stuttering about how they hadn't really talked about the future in concrete terms, that everything was just day by day. I could see it hitting him that this wasn't just some fun affair anymore, that Becca was about to be his full-time problem with real bills and real needs. He started backpedaling hard, saying maybe they moved too fast, maybe they needed to think things through, maybe they should take a break to figure things out. I just sat there watching him realize what he'd actually signed up for. After another 5 minutes of him basically talking himself out of the whole relationship, I stood up and left him sitting there with his cold coffee. The drive home took 20 minutes, and when I pulled into the driveway, Becca's car was packed with boxes, and she was carrying more out. She saw me and stopped, holding a box of kitchen stuff, and said her sister was letting her stay there for a while. I just nodded and walked past her into the house. That night after she left, the house felt different, like every room had been infected with their presence. I walked through the bedroom and could picture Mark in our bed, using our shower, sitting at our kitchen table eating breakfast, the couch where they probably watched movies together while I was at the theater alone. Even the air felt dirty somehow. I couldn't sleep in the bed, so I grabbed a blanket and tried the couch, but that felt wrong too. I ended up in the guest room on the floor with my laptop looking up cleaning services, found one that specialized in deep sanitization, and booked them for first thing Monday morning. Then I started browsing apartment listings downtown, places with no memories attached, no ghosts of betrayal in every corner. Even if I got the house in the divorce, I knew I couldn't stay there. Saturday morning I got a text from the mediator's office saying our first session was scheduled for Tuesday at 2. Becca must have gotten the same message because 10 minutes later she texted asking if we could talk before then, maybe work some things out ourselves. I didn't even respond, just forwarded the text to my lawyer who said to keep everything official from now on. Sunday morning my phone rang, and it was my brother calling from Portland. He could tell something was wrong from my voice, and when I told him everything, he went quiet for a long time. Then he said he was booking a flight for that afternoon, and would be there by dinner. I tried to tell him he didn't need to come, but he was already looking up flights while we talked. He kept saying he wanted to find Mark and have a conversation with him, the kind that involved fists, but I talked him down. Legal revenge was going to hurt way more than anything physical. He landed at 6, and we went straight to the house where he saw all the boxes Becca had left behind. We spent the rest of Sunday going through her stuff, packing things she'd missed or forgotten. Every drawer and closet had evidence of the affair hiding in it. There were receipts from restaurants I'd never been to, movie tickets from times she said she was working late, even a man's watch in her jewelry box that definitely wasn't mine. The worst was finding a Valentine's card hidden under some scarves, signed, Love Always M, from this past February, when she'd told me she didn't want to celebrate because it was too commercial. My brother held it up and shook his head, then dropped it in the box with everything else. We found hotel receipts, parking stubs from downtown when she was supposedly at her mom's, even a spare key that probably went to Mark's apartment. Every new thing we found made my brother angrier, but I just felt numb, like each discovery was just confirming what I already knew. By Monday morning we had 12 boxes packed and labeled, ready for her to pick up whenever she wanted them. The cleaning crew showed up at 8 and spent 6 hours scrubbing every surface, shampooing carpets, even sanitizing the air ducts. My brother and I sat outside on the porch while they worked, not talking much, just watching the neighborhood go about its normal Monday. When they finished, the house smelled like industrial cleaner instead of betrayal, which was an improvement, but still didn't make me want to stay there. Tuesday came fast, and my brother drove me to the mediator's office downtown. The waiting room had fake plants and magazines from 3 years ago. Becca was already there with her lawyer, wearing the dress I bought her for our 10th anniversary. The mediator called us into a conference room with a long table and too many chairs. We sat on opposite sides like kids in the principal's office. The mediator started with the easy stuff first, asking us to list our joint accounts and individual assets. I slid over copies of everything my lawyer had prepared, including the credit card statements showing Becca and Mark's joint account. Her lawyer's face changed when he saw those. Becca tried to argue she needed alimony since she made less than me, but my lawyer pointed to the 8 months of restaurant charges and hotel stays on their shared card. The mediator looked at the evidence and said, alimony wouldn't be appropriate given the circumstances. Next came the house discussion. The mediator suggested we list it and split whatever we got after paying off the mortgage. Neither of us argued. I couldn't live there anymore, and Becca couldn't afford the payments alone. We moved through the bank accounts, retirement funds, and cars pretty fast. Both of us just wanted this done. The only fight came when Becca wanted to keep the jewelry I'd given her over the years. My lawyer said gifts during marriage were joint property in our state. She kept pushing, saying they had sentimental value, which felt rich coming from someone who wore my anniversary gift to divorce mediation. The mediator suggested she keep personal jewelry, but return the expensive pieces for division. We signed the papers and scheduled another session for 2 weeks out. Walking to the parking lot, my phone buzzed with a text from Mark. He said he and Becca needed space to figure things out, and he hoped I understood. I showed my brother, and he laughed, saying Mark was already running scared now that the fun affair turned into real-life drama. Wednesday morning, the real estate agent came to take photos of the house. She walked through each room, staging things and moving furniture around. By Thursday afternoon, the listing was live online with 23 photos that made our house look like something from a magazine. Friday brought the first showing, then 3 more on Saturday. Sunday, we had an open house and 14 groups came through. The agent called Monday morning saying we had 3 offers, all above asking price. The market was crazy, and clean houses in our neighborhood didn't last long. We accepted the highest offer that afternoon. The buyers wanted a 30-day close, which worked perfect for both of us. I spent the next few days looking at apartments downtown near my office. Found a nice 1-bedroom on the 8th floor with a view of the river. The lease started in 3 weeks, right when the house sale would close. No memories there, no ghosts, just a fresh start. The building had a gym and a coffee shop on the 1st floor. I signed the lease Thursday and put down first and last month's rent. Saturday morning, Becca texted asking if she could come get more of her things. I told her I'd be out from 2 to 4. When I got back, half the garage was empty, and she'd taken the good pots and pans. She'd left a note saying she'd started therapy and was working on herself. 2 days later, she showed up while I was packing boxes in the garage. She looked tired, older, like she'd aged 5 years in 2 weeks. Her hair was pulled back and she wasn't wearing makeup. She asked if we could talk for a minute. I kept packing while she stood there. Do you hate me? She asked. I stopped and looked at her. No, I'm disappointed and hurt and angry, but hate takes too much energy. She nodded and picked up a box of her books. We packed in silence for 20 minutes before she left. The house closing happened 3 weeks later at a title company office. We signed papers in separate rooms. The lawyer brought me a check for my half of the proceeds. 12 years of marriage turned into a bank deposit. It was enough for a good start in the new apartment with plenty left over. I moved into the downtown place that weekend. My brother helped me carry boxes and set up the bed. The apartment felt clean and empty in a good way. No pictures on the walls yet, no memories in the corners. 2 weeks passed pretty quiet. Work kept me busy, and I was getting used to cooking for one. Then Saturday afternoon, I stopped at the gas station near my old neighborhood to fill up. Mark was at the next pump, saw me and tried to duck into his car. "Hey, Mark," I called out. He stopped and turned around, looking like a kid caught stealing candy. "How's things with Becca now that she's single?" His face went red. He mumbled something about it being complicated and needing to go. I watched him drive off without even finishing pumping his gas. From what I heard later through mutual friends, Becca thought they'd be together once the divorce was done, but Mark wasn't interested in a real relationship. He liked the excitement of sneaking around, not the reality of dating a woman going through a messy divorce. The irony wasn't lost on me that she threw away our marriage for a guy who was already backing away before the ink dried on our divorce papers. 3 weeks later, my lawyer called while I was unpacking boxes in the new apartment. She said the paperwork was done and the divorce was final after just under 3 months of mediation. I was officially single again at 35, starting over with half of everything, but finally free. I hung up and sat on my couch surrounded by boxes, looking out at the riverview and feeling lighter than I had in years. The next Thursday, I got a text from Tony, asking if I wanted to grab a beer and talk. We met at the same dive bar where Becca had searched for me that night, and he ordered us 2 beers before sitting down across from me. He said he'd processed everything, and understood why I needed space even if he wished I'd just been honest about needing alone time. I told him the whole story from the beginning, about discovering the affair, the surveillance, following Becca around town, all the mind games I'd played. He whistled low and shook his head, saying he was glad I handled it legally, instead of how he might have reacted if he'd caught his wife with another man. We shot pool for 3 hours, and by the end of the night, things felt almost normal between us again. Over the next few months, I heard things through mutual friends about how everything played out. Becca had apparently thought she and Mark would be together officially once the divorce was done, but he kept making excuses about needing time and space. She'd call crying to her friends, saying she didn't understand what changed since he'd been so into her during the affair. 3 months after the divorce was final, I heard she'd started dating some guy from her gym who didn't know about any of the drama. Mark had actually moved to Seattle for real this time, running away from the mess he'd helped create, and probably looking for his next married woman to chase. Meanwhile, I'd started seeing a woman from my apartment building who lived 2 floors down. She was a nurse who worked long shifts and didn't know anything about my history with Becca. We'd run into each other at the coffee shop downstairs a few times before she asked if I wanted to grab dinner. It was casual and easy with no pressure or lies, just 2 people enjoying each other's company without any games or deception. She'd come over and we'd cook together or watch movies on my couch. Simple things that felt good after all the drama. Sometimes late at night I'd think about how Becca and I had both been lonely in our marriage, but handled it in different ways. I'd escaped through solitude, sitting alone in dark theaters eating popcorn and watching whatever was playing. She'd escaped through another person, building a whole secret relationship while I was supposedly out with friends. Both were symptoms of something that had already been broken between us for years. We'd stopped talking to each other, really talking, and started living parallel lives in the same house. These days, my Thursday nights are actually spent with friends for real this time. Tony and I meet up at the bar to shoot pool and catch up on work stuff. Sometimes other guys join us, and we'll watch whatever game is on the TV above the bar. Last week, Tony brought his brother, and we played teams until midnight, trash-talking and buying rounds when someone scratched on the 8-ball. I'm learning that honest connection beats comfortable deception every single time, even when the truth is harder to share than a lie would be. Thanks for sticking with me through all this. It's definitely been a journey worth sharing. Until we meet again, folks. If you made it to the end, drop a comment. I love reading all your comments.